You think you are earning more every year. Your salary has increased, your expenses are managed, and by every visible measure, you are doing the responsible thing. But here is what the numbers do not show you. Your purchasing power is declining faster than your income is rising. And the financial system you are operating inside was not designed to correct that gap. It was designed to widen it. This is not about poor spending habits. This is not about discipline. This is about a structural mechanism that operates continuously, silently, and in plain sight. And most working professionals have no framework to see it clearly. Let us begin with what inflation actually is, not the textbook definition, but the functional reality of how it moves through your financial life. Inflation is most commonly described as rising prices. That description is accurate but incomplete. What inflation actually represents is a continuous reduction in the purchasing power of money held in its base form. Every dollar sitting in a standard savings account, every dollar allocated to fixed monthly expenses, every dollar you are planning to use 3 years from now, each of those dollars is being quietly diminished, not dramatically, not in a way that triggers alarm, but consistently, compounding in reverse, eroding value in the background while your attention is focused on income. The average inflation rate across developed economies has historically hovered between 2 and 4% annually. That number sounds manageable. It does not feel urgent. But apply it across a decade and the mathematics becomes structurally significant. At 3% annual inflation, $100,000 in purchasing power today becomes roughly $74,000 in real terms a decade from now. You did not lose the money. It is still in your account, but its ability to do what you intended it to do has contracted by more than a quarter without a single error on your part. And this is where the first structural dynamic becomes visible. Most salaried professionals evaluate their financial progress through nominal figures, your salary this year versus last, your savings balance today versus 6 months ago. These comparisons feel meaningful because they reflect real numbers, but they do not account for the unit of measurement itself changing. Measuring your financial progress in nominal dollars while inflation moves is like measuring your height with a ruler that shrinks slightly every year. The number goes up, but what it represents is not what you think. Your employer may have given you a 4% raise this year. In isolation, that sounds like progress. But if inflation ran at 3.5% during that same period, your real wage increase was approximately 0.5%. Your lifestyle costs more to maintain, your savings buy less, and the gap between what you earn and what your money actually accomplishes quietly narrows while you continue operating under the assumption that things are improving. This mechanism does not feel like a loss. That is precisely why it persists. Now consider a second structural layer that compounds the first. Inflation does not move uniformly across all categories of spending. It concentrates. Housing costs in most major metropolitan areas across the United States and Europe have inflated at rates that significantly outpace general consumer price indices. Healthcare expenditures have followed a similar trajectory. Education costs, childcare, insurance premiums, these categories, which represent the core spending of working professionals between 25 and 45, have inflated faster than the average figures that appear in official reports. What this means structurally is that the inflation number most people reference, the headline Consumer Price Index, understates the actual cost pressure experienced by professionals in the middle income bracket. The categories that inflate most aggressively are precisely the categories that consume the largest proportion of a salaried professional's income. You are not navigating average inflation. You are navigating concentrated inflation in the areas where your money is most heavily allocated. And the response most professionals take, working harder, earning slightly more, maintaining current financial behaviors, addresses the symptom without engaging the structure. There's a third dynamic operating beneath both of these, and it is perhaps the least discussed. Modern financial systems are built around the assumption that capital should be deployed, not stored. Interest rates, monetary policy, asset valuations, all of these mechanisms function within a framework where idle capital loses value over time. This is not an accident of policy. It is a deliberate structural feature. Central banks in both the United States and across Europe have, for extended periods, maintained real interest rates, that is, interest rates adjusted for inflation, at or near zero, and in some periods below
below zero. What this means in practical terms is that the financial system actively penalizes cash accumulation. The saver, the individual who does the responsible thing by holding money in low-risk accounts, is structurally positioned on the losing side of the return equation. Meanwhile, capital deployed into productive assets, real estate, equity ownership, business interests, all of these capture returns that at minimum keep pace with inflation, and in many cases significantly exceed it. This is not a coincidence. It is the architecture of the system, and it explains a pattern that many professionals observe but rarely articulate clearly. Why individuals with substantial incomes and disciplined savings behaviors still feel financially constrained after years of doing everything correctly. The structure is not rewarding the behavior they were told to exhibit. So what does a more sophisticated financial positioning actually look like, not as instruction, but as a framework for how the system is being navigated differently by those who understand it? The first shift is from nominal thinking to real return thinking. Financially sophisticated individuals do not evaluate financial decisions based on stated rates or percentage increases alone. They evaluate every financial position against the inflation-adjusted outcome. A savings product yielding 2% in a 3% inflation environment is not a conservative choice. It is a guaranteed loss of real value accepted voluntarily. The second shift involves understanding the difference between assets that inflate and liabilities that inflate. Most salary professionals carry both. A fixed-rate mortgage, for example, is a liability denominated in nominal dollars. As inflation rises, the real cost of that debt decreases over time. The monthly payment stays fixed while the purchasing power of money declines. This is a structural feature of long-term fixed debt that many professionals overlook when evaluating their financial position. The common mistake here is treating all debt as equivalent, viewing fixed long-term obligations and variable short-term consumer debt as belonging to the same category when their relationship to inflation is fundamentally opposite. The third shift involves the distinction between income and return. Salary income is compensation for time and skill. It is subject to income taxation, it does not compound, and it is entirely dependent on continued participation. Return, by contrast, generated through asset ownership, equity positions, or capital deployed into appreciating instruments, operates with different tax treatment, compounds over time, and does not require the same sustained personal input. Professionals who remain almost entirely reliant on salary income are structurally exposed to inflation in a way that those with diversified return streams are not. This is not a matter of investing aggressively. It is a matter of understanding where within the financial system your capital is positioned relative to inflationary pressure. Here is the quiet realization that tends to arrive late for most working professionals. The financial behaviors that feel most responsible, saving consistently, avoiding unnecessary debt, living within your means, maintaining stable employment, are not wrong, but they were designed for a different monetary environment. In an era of persistently elevated inflation, near zero real interest on savings, and asset prices that have outpaced wage growth for decades, the conventional framework of financial responsibility produces a specific outcome. It produces stability without accumulation. It keeps you solvent, but it does not move you forward relative to the system you are operating inside. The individuals who navigate this differently are not necessarily taking greater risks. They are operating with a more accurate model of how the financial system actually functions, not how it is described in general financial advice, but how its structural incentives actually distribute outcomes. They understand that inflation is not an external disruption to their financial plan. It is a permanent feature of the environment they are planning within, and they position accordingly. The question is not whether inflation is affecting your financial life. It is. The question is whether you have a structural understanding of how, and whether your current financial positioning reflects that understanding, or the one you were handed before you had enough information to evaluate it critically. If this changed how you evaluate your financial structure, consider subscribing to Unfiltered Finance.